Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning. Parents, what if we could give you the power to transform your family into something absolutely amazing?
A family where everyone is healthy, gets along, loves Jesus, and has great purpose in life.
Hey, let us flip your thinking to unlock the power God has given you to create your own Crazy Cool family.
Hey, this is Jeff Zog from the Dad Awesome podcast. I love the Crazy Cool family, and specifically I hopped into Basecamp, all of these resources, the video resources, the specific guides that let me put the names of my daughters and my wife and just showing me visually, hey, am I making progress? What areas can I attend more to? So I'm so thankful. I want to encourage you guys to hop into Basecamp, sign up, dive into those first intro videos. It's been so helpful for my family.
Hey guys, welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning and our very, very special guest, Julie Plagens. And Julie has written a book called Estranged.
Let's see it. Let's show the people.
There you go. And
Isn't it beautiful?
Finding hope. So really finding hope when your family falls apart, which is, and we've been talking to Julie, and it certainly happened with her. And so Julie, just introduce yourself first. Just tell us welcome first and tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, hi, Don and Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I have been listening to your fight series and all the other wonderful encouragements you're giving to parents. So I'm so excited to be on your podcast and just to help contribute some of the things on what to do and not to do. Thank you very much.
Sure. So tell us your story a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background so we can kind of, we've already read through your book, but give our listeners a little thumbnail version of why, how did this book come about?
With a lot of prayer and a lot of sorrow. But I was born in Dallas, Texas, and my parents were in the nightclub business. They started, my grandfather started a restaurant in the 40s called the Italian Village. And then my dad took it over when he was 23. My grandfather went out of town and my dad decided to turn it into a nightclub without his permission. Wow. So my grandfather came back and my dad had spent to what's equivalent to like about $300,000 today's money.
Wow.
And turned the part of the restaurant to a nightclub, and it was a success. It was a hit overnight. So he became an instant millionaire at 23 years old. So I grew up, in some of those years when my dad and my mom were big into the nightclub business. They traveled to Las Vegas. My dad was there quite a bit, Hollywood, and a lot of the nightclub acts from Vegas came to my dad's restaurant. It was called Gringos. Back then it was in the 60s. It was a good 10 years that they did this.
Wow.
And my dad eventually, I think my mom and dad were both just miserable, and they had everything money could ever buy. They lived in Highland Park, which is kind of the Beverly Hills of Texas.
Right.
And we lived 2 doors down from a huge mansion. We had 3 maids, or we had a cook and a maid and a laundry maid. We had everything you could possibly imagine, and they were empty. And they ended up getting saved. And so my dad pulled the alcohol out of the restaurant, and it totally collapsed, and it made the national news as well as the local news. Crazy guy pulls the alcohol out, and they all thought he just got nuts. He was making like $50,000 a month back then in alcohol sales. So you can imagine what happened after that. My parents almost lost their house. They had to sell it. Salvation changed their lives completely, but my dad just knew he couldn't do that. So in the meantime, my grandparents were horrified and furious. And I don't go too much into my family history, but I will say that my family has a very dark history. Italians in Las Vegas, you can connect the dots from there.
Right.
That did not go well with my grandparents, and they disowned my father and subsequently our whole family. So I lost a whole half of my family. We were estranged from, I was probably 5 or 6 when it happened. And that was the first estrangement in my family. And I will tell you that estrangement is a stronghold, and it does pass down generationally if you do not fight for your family. And eventually it happened to me. we had a lot of dysfunctional behaviors growing up in our family. My dad and mom had learned from their family what to do, and it was more of a fear-based parenting. And even though my
I'm gonna
dad,
guess that your dad had I mean, it seems like from reading the book and from talking to you briefly that he had a pretty radical conversion.
he did.
Did your mom also have the same conversion?
Well, not at first. My dad was a pretty mean man and he was pretty scary. And so when my dad got saved, my mom was like, okay, this guy's different. And so just from him being different, she started looking at it. And eventually, I think about 8 or 9 months later, she was saved too. I mean, she thought he'd kind of gone nuts when he pulled out the alcohol, but she supported him and decided, I mean, they were drawing some pretty interesting characters into the restaurant.
Right.
So I think that she was kind of glad maybe that clientele was maybe going away a bit. But yeah, it was a very tumultuous time for me as a child losing our house. I was scared. I was scared I wouldn't spend the night out because when I came home, I didn't know where I was going to be. So it was a very scarring time for me. I had a lot of losses. I lost, the maids that helped take care of me. I lost aunts and uncles. I lost a lot of people. I had a lot of abandonment issues growing up. From that time period of so many losses. So, but eventually, and I will say that there was no sexual abuse with my dad. I want to clear that up. But you can have a lot of dysfunction without that happening.
Right.
And as I was sharing earlier, my counselor who I had worked at Menrith Meyer, he said my family was in the top 3 worst dysfunctional families that he had ever seen. So I understand dysfunction, I understand pain, I understand hurt, and I understand unforgiveness and bitterness and anger. And it took a toll on me. And I had started having abdominal issues when I was in college, a lot of stomach issues. And then it just morphed as I got married. After our first child, it really started getting worse. Eventually, after my second child, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. It started small. It started as colitis and grew into Crohn's. Mm-hmm. And for your audience, may not know what Crohn's is. I'll explain. It's like having the stomach flu, food poisoning, and any other. And an ulcer at the same time.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
So
it's ulcerations anywhere from your mouth all the way down to the rectum. And so I got really, really sick, and we'd been married about 6 or 7 years by this time. I had 2 kids, and I was not able to tolerate even water. I was not tolerating food. I wasn't tolerating anything. It would come out one end or the other. And I won't get too graphic, but you can understand everything vile that can happen did, plus a lot of blood.
Oh
so there was a lot of bleeding going on.
How old were your kids at this time?
They were, let's see, my daughter would have been in kindergarten and my son would have been about 5th grade, 5th or 6th grade. So 1st and 6th, maybe. So they were young, and my husband was having to work a ton of hours. He was in a very stressful job. He was a CFO for a company. And he really could not stay home with me. And I just had to figure it out. And so I was the point where, my doctor was like, you have to get a colonoscopy to find out what's happening, because I thought I was dying. And so they did. And after the colonoscopy, the nurse came in, not the doctor. And the nurse said, you have Crohn's disease. You're going to lose your colon. You're going to have a bag, an external bag, the rest of your life. And this is irreversible.
Oh my!
And then she walked out. That was it. And I was left alone in my hospital bed and just thinking I want to die. And it was at that point, that is when the scales came off my eyes and I realized that I was angry. I hated my parents.
Yeah.
I hated my family. I was bitter. I had so much unforgiveness and I had contained it all in my head, thinking that nobody else would know. And I tried to even hide it from my husband, my family, everybody. And it was that day that I realized that I could no longer hide it and I had to get away. And I decided that day that I was going to leave my family. And my husband was not on board, didn't know anything about it at the time, but that was it. That was the day. And eventually within the year I did. My husband and I had tried very hard to have a relationship with my parents. It kept one blow up after another. And he got exasperated as well. And we both decided to leave. And
But
we
so,
left.
and taking our listeners a little bit forward there, so your Crohn's disease, which they said was irreversible,
Mhm.
was reversed through as you started to heal mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Is that
Mhm.
right?
Yes, it did.
Mhm.
Today, I mean, we'll get to the whole story of how it happened, but today I take no medicine. I did not lose my colon. And my last colonoscopy, he said, if you did not have a small scar, well, he said it was not a small scar. If you didn't have a scar there, he said, I would never know you had Crohn's. And he said, even people with medicine, it's maybe a 10 to 15% chance that you would ever get rid of Crohn's. So I'm a walking miracle.
Definitely. And I just think that and I totally completely believe this, that our, what we're going through emotionally manifests itself physically. And
It
so that's
does.
exactly what happened with you. And you're just, like you said, a walking miracle of all that bitterness and rage and anger and all that stuff was just made your body just reject itself,
It
basically.
did.
And then you turned around, you flipped that, and you started
Mhm.
seeking how to get rid of all of that bitterness, rage, and anger, and then your body was allowed to heal. I just think
Yeah.
that's a powerful testimony.
Well, and what I got out of the book is that, a lot of times when people, you had to make a break from the relationships that were harming you, and
Mhm.
it was also you holding on to your forgiveness, as you just said.
Mhm.
But that break allowed you. A lot of times when those breaks happen, people just leave them. They stay alienated.
Right.
But really, your goal with the break. If again, don't let me put words in your mouth. I'm going from the book. That your goal in the break was to be able to get away so you could get healed
Mhm.
and restore the relationships. And so,
Yeah.
walk us on that journey a little bit of how, so many people maybe aren't estranged, but they have really difficult relationships
Yeah.
with their parents.
And they wish
Uh,
they were estranged. They wish they could walk away, but they
Yeah.
don't have the courage,
Yeah.
maybe.
So-
Which I feel like
Yeah.
it's very courageous to be able to do that. Very courageous.
Yeah.
Especially knowing that you wanted to heal it on the back end, knowing that you needed the separation on the front end so that it could be eventually healed.
Yeah.
walk us through that journey.
Well, okay, so I'll back up a tiny bit. I didn't tell you that after my dad got saved, he ended up in the ministry and ended up being the associate pastor of 2 mega churches here in Dallas. So my estrangement and the whole family issues, I mean, we were the poster child for Christian family. On the outside, our family looked perfect. And we were pretty much told not to, discuss anything outside the family. And so for me to walk away from our family, it went against every rule, that was in our family about you don't talk about family stuff outside of anybody. And interestingly, my
Which
oldest,
was one of the dysfunctions.
Yeah.
one of the very big dysfunctions.
Right.
And my older sister had actually walked away a year or two earlier. So there's 3 girls. My oldest sister had already been estranged, and then my middle sister stayed, and then I walked away. So 2 out of the 3 girls had walked away in estrangement. And that was pretty hard on my parents, and I knew it would be. And I had so much guilt when I walked away. I never wanted to do it. I never wanted to hurt my parents, but I was pushed up. I felt like I was pushed up in a corner, and it was either my colon or continue where I was. And I knew that what I was doing was not honoring to God and not honoring to who I was, because I just couldn't be who I wanted to be. So when I did walk away, at the time, and I vacillated back and forth of whether I could ever go back because our relationship was so dysfunctional. I wanted to go back, and I prayed for God to help me go back. But even my counselor said the percentage of you, being able to go back and have some sort of relationship with your family is very low. And so I was like, okay, but there's that, I think he even said 99% chance you won't go back. And I said, but
Oh, wow.
there's the 1%. And that's what I told him. So I had a 1% chance of ever coming back. And I thought, okay, I'll hang on 1%. And so the first thing I did was I went to go get counseling. The first year I really worked on just trying to get well, and just having that stress down really helped for my colon to start healing. And within the year, I was able to tolerate almost every food. So that was the first thing. And I think it's part of that fight or flight in the amygdala that is in there where it's stuck. And until you can really get your brain to get out of fight or flight, you can't get any healing. And that was the first thing I really did, was just get out of fight or flight.
What word did you use?
Good.
It's the back of your brain is called the amygdala.
Oh, wow.
That part of your brain is the part that's the fight or flight that's triggered.
Right.
And if you read The Body Keeps the Score, you will understand a lot about childhood trauma. And that's where part of that is coming from.
Wow.
So anyways, but yeah, that part I had to really work on. And I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I knew I was stuck in fight or flight, and I knew I had to calm down. So that in itself helped me to start healing. And I also went on a diet called the special carbohydrate diet, which really helped too. But then until I got into counseling, I did 16 months of counseling and really started working through my family issues. And that's where the forgiveness started. And I, went through a Christian counselor and someone who could really help me to stop ruminating and to, stop trying to control a situation that was not controllable, and stop with the self-pity and stop with the lies. And I really had to address the strongholds, the generational strongholds of our family.
Yeah, you also said in the book you were a real people pleaser.
Oh, yes. I mean, I jumped through every hoop that my parents asked me to do. All three of us were the golden children. We never got into trouble. I never once got drunk, never did drugs, I never did anything. I was the typical pastor's kid. All three of us were. And I'm sure on the outside, people were like, how do you have three perfect children? But we weren't. There was all that, fear inside of us, because as you talked about in your parenting, and your older kids, that you parented more in a fear-based. And that's where our family stayed. I just knew if I did anything wrong, I'd be, next to dead. So
right.
I just didn't have a chance to act out. So, and I sadly repeated some of that. Unfortunately, those generational strongholds, you do what you learned.
When you say you repeated it, you mean with your children?
Yes, I did.
What did that share a little bit about what that looked like with your the generational curses, which I've totally seen that. I've broken several of my own alcoholism in my own family, my own life. And so what did that look like for you and your family with this estrangement? Because your parents were estranged from their parents, and now you're being estranged from your parents. And what did that look like for you?
Well, in fact, my daughter even is working through some of it even now. And she said those 7 years that I was away from my parents, she said I was really fearful that what happened in my family was going to happen with me and my children. And she said, Mom, you did some of the same things your parents did. You were fear-based parenting, and I was more scared of you, and I couldn't come and approach you and talk to you. And so she acted out. Both of my kids acted out in ways that I feared that they shouldn't, was trying to prevent.
Yeah.
And instead of having an open door, as you all suggest, and having a place that's more encouraging and inspiration, we again repeated some of the same mistakes, and we're going back now. Even this morning, y'all are still having an impact on me, even though, because I've listened to a ton of your podcast, and my daughter's 23 and she's living with us. And this morning I walked into her room and I said, thank you so much for not being noisy last night when you came in. And she looked at me and she said, Mom, thank you so much for saying that. And, I know as a teacher, because I'm a teacher, and I know how much encouragement helps and inspiration. And I did that in my teaching, and I did that some with my kids. But apparently the fear-based overtook the encouragement. And I have so many regrets for that.
Well, and so for a lot
it's
of
never
parents,
too late, though. Just to encourage you and all the parents out there, it's never too late. Just like you walking in this morning and telling her about last night, that right there starts paving that road, which is powerful. It starts cleaning up those lies that we believe in our head about what's happened in the past, because what was is not anymore, and that's what we want to cling to the good.
Yes, and forgiving is a huge part of it.
And wouldn't you say that as as you've moved from more encouraging to more encouraging and inspiring, what's been the impact overall with the relationship with your son and daughter?
Oh, it's healing. It is so much better. And I really started that journey probably when my daughter went to college. So it's been like 5 or 6 years I've been doing that, and it's really reversed some of the curses and the generational things. I'm forgiving and I'm teaching forgiveness. This is still pretty. It's and it impacted our marriage as well. I can't tell you, and I've got a book coming out about how this impacted our marriage. And this whole fear-based thing, it impacts everybody in every relationship, and how just in our marriage and in our relationships with our kids, talking about, I love you, you're so great. And even the things that, as I think you all have said, things that they're not quite there yet, you just speak into what you see,
Potential.
what you see in the future. So it's been revolutionary for me.
So I was going to say, I love what we talk about physical, emotional, and spiritual all the time. And I love how you pulled back and you took care of the physical, right away.
Yeah.
You changed your diet, you changed your fight or flight mechanism, and then you start counseling with the emotional. But in the book, you talk about what you did spiritually to come along beside you to help with that forgiveness, because we talk about forgiveness as a superpower. It's given to us by God.
Right.
In our own strength, we actually cannot forgive because we can't forget. And so we're connected to that. And so we literally have to have the power of God to help us to forgive. And so what is it that you did, or share with our audience what you wrote about in the book?
Yeah, really, I got forgiveness and reconciliation all mixed up, and I had to define that there's a difference between the two. Forgiveness is about the offense. Reconciliation is about the relationship. And I had to work on the offense. I was estranged for 7 years, and during those 7 years, I had to really work on the offenses.
Say that again. I think I affirmed your comment. I may have overtaken your statement there. Forgiveness versus reconciliation. Say that again.
Forgiveness is about the offense. And it's not, forgiveness is something that is given. It is not earned. It's about doing what God commands us to do. And in the Bible, I have looked, and I have been a Christian most of my life, and I have looked, there are no loopholes on forgiveness. It just that happens. So for any unforgivers,
find it, right?
I have been looking, and there is no loophole. And so for any unforgiver that's out there, from one unforgiver to another, God commands us to forgive no matter what.
And literally,
that's good, girl. That's good.
And literally, the holding of forgiveness almost made you have to remove your colon.
It did. And that's what I realized. And it took almost losing my colon and having an external bag the rest of my life to go, okay, forgiveness, I'll take forgiveness over losing my colon. That's how stubborn I was. And that's how much I did not want to forgive. And that's what it took for me.
But versus reconciliation, when you say, because we think that it's our job to reconcile with everyone. And God does say, be reconciled, but that doesn't, how do you distinguish reconciliation?
Well, it's about a relationship, and it takes two people, and it takes a lot of forgiveness, and I'm sorry, and it takes change. You cannot be in a relationship with somebody if they're not willing to work on the relationship, and it's two-sided. Forgiveness is one-sided. It's between you and God. Relationship and reconciliation is between two people.
And really, we can be reconciled in our heart with someone, even though they're not reconciled to us. When the Bible says be reconciled, we can talk about how we can do that. It's all about our heart posture, right? And you've been through that at a very extreme, way. How did you go from being completely unforgiving, looking for loopholes, to being completely forgiving?
Well, it took a long time. I'm stubborn. And it took this full 7 years. And I did not know. I thought, well, God's not working on my parents' side. It's just me that's going to, God was so gracious. And I had to learn that God loved me, first of all. I did not embrace the fact that God loved me. I thought he loved everybody else. I thought I was an unloved person. And so I had to first embrace that God loved me. And then the forgiveness. And then, I started praying for my parents. And that's what really started breaking some of the unforgiveness, is praying for them, praying for God to prosper them, praying for healing, praying for everything good to happen to them. And my husband and I both started praying for him. And individually, God had been telling us that we needed to try and get back in the relationship with them. And I was very untrusting, didn't want to do it, was very stubborn, but God kept just wooing me through the whole thing. And at the 7th year, at 7,
No, your
Um,
completion or the number of completion. Yeah.
yeah. So
Perfect.
at Christmas, my husband and I both felt like God was telling us we needed to reconcile. And I was thinking, because the holidays are hard, and I'd gone through 7 years of trying to explain why we were estranged from our family, and it was messy. My family was well known. And God had really been telling me, you need to pray and fast. And I was like, ugh, pray. Okay, yeah, I can do pray. But fasting, starve myself? Really? I've been
Right.
deprived of food for so many times. I did not want to fast. I had been sick for so long and had gone without food so long. And it was just a really big struggle to not eat. But I said, okay, Lord, I'll do it. And so in January of 2017, I fasted and prayed on a Monday and Tuesday. And I just said, Lord, my dad he's an Italian. They're kind of known for being stubborn. Lord, talk to him through a dream. Because I thought, well, he's not talking to him through the daytime. Lord, talk to him at the nighttime. And I prayed for a hellfire and brimstone dream. Maybe, God will get him and hear him, And so God, in his loving way, it was interesting because I prayed this and fasted for those 2 days. And I prayed Monday and Tuesday. And my dad called Andy, my husband, on Friday. And that was after 7 years.
Yeah.
There's no other way it could be than God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So interestingly, my husband went down and talked to him the next day and didn't tell me, or that Friday night, he went down and talked to him, and they made peace, but there was no I'm sorry's or any kind of reconciliation that way. So the next day, my husband told me what he had done. He talked to my parents, and I was like, what? You talked to him and you didn't even tell me. But so we talked through it. He said he didn't apologize for anything, but he wants to make peace. And I was like, gosh, I prayed and fasted, and I thought, gosh, this is a miracle. This is so great. And then a day or two later, my heart hardened because there was no I'm sorry's. And so then the next Tuesday, we had Bible study fellowship, and my BSF teacher talked about forgiveness for 45 minutes.
Wow.
And my chair was hot. I mean, I've never
echo.
I was moving around. I kept looking at my friends who were with me. Their chair's not hot. What did they do to my chair? And it was like, okay, God, I get it. And so I called my mom and we started talking. We ended up within the month having, I think it was our anniversary was like 5 years ago, maybe the other day, that when I came down there and had dinner with them. So we were at dinner that night. My dad starts talking and he fesses up and he says he had a dream, and that's why he called me.
Oh, wow.
And I about dropped my fork. I was like, you're kidding. You had a dream. And that's why. And I said, I prayed for God to talk to you in a dream. And he said, yeah, that's what happened. He said, in the middle of the night, I think it was like Thursday night, it was Wednesday or Thursday night, God showed him that we were in the dining room eating dinner. And it was kind of more of a vision. And he said that we were talking and it was peaceful, and that was what we were all reconciled. And he woke up and he woke my mom up in the middle of the night and said, Julie's coming home. And she was like, yeah, right, go back to sleep, the next lasagna, And so the next day, that's when he called. And so I didn't tell him at dinner that I'd prayed for a hellfire and brimstone dream.
Well,
So it was kind of funny though.
I'm fascinated by, the 7 years. And then I think this is so helpful for, parents that are struggling with their relationship with their parents and struggling with forgiveness, and a couple of things I just think are themes that are coming out. One of them is that you sought counseling.
I did.
And
that helped.
And that really helped. I mean, and also think about it, this was 7 years. I mean, we think it needs to be fixed,
tomorrow.
Yes. But
Yeah.
I mean, you went through 16 months of counseling, and really one of the things, even on page 38 of your book, you're like, there's all these things that you were telling yourself.
Yeah.
It wasn't related to forgiveness, but it was the healing that had to happen in order to allow yourself to forgive. It's all my fault. It's all their fault. No one can really love me. I'm not worthy of love. I'm abandoned. No one understands me. I'm a failure. I'm embarrassed. It goes on and on, but I mean, all these things that you were getting from your parent relationship and from your life
Yeah.
that you had to go and get healed before you could move on to be able to forgive, right?
Yeah. What I did was I wrote down all the lies, and then I made note cards with scripture. Every single note card had counteracted every lie. And I started reading those note cards every single day out loud and internally to myself. And I had to rewire the truth. And I think, what do y'all call it?
Rethinking.
Rethink. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Thinking.
yeah. I just had to rethink on and tell myself what the truth was and go back and put God's truth in instead of the lies from the devil. Because really the devil, that's his name. His name means accuser. He is the liar. And the strongholds that I had to break, there were multiple strongholds to get back to my family. And as in the You're in the Fight series, I had to fight. And 2 Corinthians 10:4-5 says, the weapons we fight are not the weapons of the world. On contrary, they have divine powers to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we can take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ.
Yeah.
And I still do that. I mean, when you have a habit of doing that all your life, it is a fight. It is a fight
Yeah.
to get
And
yourself.
don't you find as you're talking to
So
people
good.
that are reconciling so often, it's like, well, and even within our own family relationships, within our nuclear family, well, if my wife will change, then if my wife will say she's sorry, then
Right.
I'm going to go at it. But it's really God always
Right.
directs it to be about us.
It is. And
And
that's
that was the key to your healing.
Mhm.
And so it
Yeah.
is that you had to think about it. It's our pastor wrote a book called Follow the Cloud, and he starts it out with, it really is about me.
It is.
And because he's not saying that the world's about me, but our reconciliation, our healing, everything. And it's amazing to me how then you have broken the legacy with your family.
Mhm.
That there was a chance of estrangement there,
Yeah.
but as you flipped, now and one of the things I just want to encourage parents, we are all legacy breakers. We can all build a
Yes.
different legacy. It doesn't matter how bad it might have been for you. Anyone can break a legacy through the power of forgiveness and through the power of healing.
That is right. And we're teaching at my church, we teach something, a marriage class, and it's called, one of their concepts is stay in your circle. And really, you have to deal with you. And I had focused on my parents and their dysfunctional behavior and what they were doing. And I had to stop. And it was all about me and my healing and what God was telling me to do. And the Holy Spirit directly said, you leave them to me. Is not your business. And so, and I will say, even since I've gotten back into the family, I've been in the family for about 5 years now again, and there's still dysfunctional behaviors, and I've had to learn how to set boundaries and to go back to God and not be an idol worshiper of pleasing my parents over pleasing God, because I really struggle with, and still do struggle with, people pleasing.
Okay,
when
so I have
I-
a question.
Yeah.
When you talk to parents today that are having issues with their parents,
Mhm.
and I'm sure you get questions about it, and I'm sure now you get all kinds of people asking you all kinds of questions.
Because you're an expert now that you wrote a book.
My parents did this, yeah. And so, when do you recommend that someone make a break with their parents, a season in order to heal? I mean, do you have a criteria, or do you have anything kind of, how does that work?
Well, I tell people, and we did, my family, my husband and I went to counseling with another counselor with my parents, and we did try counseling. We tried, I would say, try everything before you make a family break. Mine was to the point where I was so sick that I had to break away. And I would try setting boundaries, and I did with my parents. The counselor said to set boundaries. They kept getting broken. And I would step back again. They kept getting broken. I kept stepping back more. I would have less of a relationship. And it finally devolved into nothing, and where we just couldn't have a relationship. So part of the problem with me on setting the boundaries was that I could not hold them. The people pleasing came in there so much that I just would not, I would say, please don't speak to me this way. If you do, I just don't, I would give a boundary and a thing that I couldn't hold it. I couldn't hold the boundary that I set. And that people pleasing was a rewiring I had to do. I just did not have the tools to have a healthy relationship with my parents. And they weren't changing, and it had to be me. So I would totally recommend doing everything you can. But if you are so sick and you need to get away to save your life, I would do it. If there's sexual abuse, definitely you need to walk away. That is definitely one that or there's sexual abuse with your children. Verbal abuse, if it's just so bad that you can't take it, you need to, I think there's a breaking point and you need to pray. I never recommend people to walk away until they've prayed. And I would recommend Gary Thomas, When to Walk Away, is a great book to tell the difference between a toxic relationship and a difficult relationship.
Yeah, we'll
good.
put that in the show notes. Gary Thomas,
When to Walk Away.
And then obviously we're gonna. Well, do you have anything else as we kind of wrap this up a little bit? Do you have any other questions for Julie?
I just want to know, what does the relationship what does everything look like now? Like with your parents, do you guys see each other?
Yeah, I have a relationship with them. It ebbs and flows. My dad has a brain injury right now, and some of the filter has gone off of him, which has been extremely difficult. I have a closer relationship with my mom than I do with my dad. My relationship with them is intact. And I do see them. I do talk to them. I talked to my mom on the phone yesterday. So I have a healthy relationship with them, but I have to set boundaries? Yeah, still do.
And you're able to hold them now.
I have the tools to hold a relationship with them. They're in their 80s. My mom has changed more probably than my dad has been able to. His health has been hard to navigate. I'm still navigating it. It's not like when you go back to the family that it's going to be kumbaya. And I address that in the book.
Yeah.
That's good.
Neat to know that my mom did do the afterword on my book. And I've had their complete blessing on talking about it. Both of them have given their complete blessing. So
that's one. So as we wrap up the story and your story, one of the things we say at Crazy Cool Family is we have to be healthy, our best selves. We have to get, what is it that
the best thing you can do for your family is present them the healthiest version of you.
Yeah.
And that's what you did. And so I just value that and I appreciate that as a wife, and as a mom, and as a daughter. You and then a princess of the Most High King. You withdrew so that you could become your healthiest, best self. So then as you turned around, you could now come back as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter. And be healthy and bring health to the situation, bring God to the situation, bring life, light, and love to the relationships. And so I just say, well done.
Yeah, exactly.
Well done,
Thank you.
sister. I mean, well
it's not
done.
been easy.
Yeah, you did the hard stuff. And so we're just grateful for you. And thank you for sharing your story with our Crazy Cool Family.
Yeah, another thing I think about is, you said you were the perfect kid, quote unquote, because you did everything right. And so often we find with our parents, Christian parents, that becomes our goal, to create the perfect kid that does everything right. And what I want to challenge parents to do is to look beyond the outside into the inside, because within that perfectness, quote unquote, there was a lot of dysfunction.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's such an issue that our Christian parents are dealing with, in that, especially with, now a lot of times it happens with the firstborn. They are people pleasers extraordinaire. So if your child is a people pleaser and you see that and you think, oh, there's nothing wrong because they're not doing anything wrong, quote unquote, check their heart out.
Well, because it's about behavior, and that's not what we're going after at all. Behavior is a byproduct. It's the relationship. That's what we're going after. And so
my heart was rotten. Rotten.
Yeah. Well, and you say it was rotten
I would say
because
that perfect behavior is a red flag.
Yeah.
I would say that because they're performing for
Yeah.
your approval, they're not
Right.
performing for they don't want your relationship, or they don't even know how to have a relationship with you.
well, and your heart was rotten, you said, quote unquote, because that it was, this will never get fixed. I will always be afraid. I can't forgive. I'm alone. All those things that you put in here in pages 38 and 39. That's why you felt like, and actually you were a believer. So God had your heart, but it was just some negative thought processes were in there.
Enemy.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so share with our people. How do they connect with you? How do they get your book? How do you've got a website, social media. We're all on social media now. How do they connect with you through all of that?
Okay. Well, Facebook is, and Instagram and Pinterest are all Julie A. Plagens, Plagens. And then my website is momremade.com. And then my book you can find on Amazon and any other digital platform. It's called Estranged, Finding Hope When Your Family Falls Apart. And it gives not just my story, but it gives tips to help you on what could be happening in your family and then how to work through it.
yeah, the book is actually written like a workbook. It has discussion questions at the end. In fact, it's
such an easy read, and it's an interesting too. Like I've read it and could have read it in all one night, if I wanted to, because it's it's thought provoking. So you have to stop in between, but it draws you to the next chapter.
Yeah, it says a biblical step-by-step guide towards healing your family problems. So a lot of us have family problems. And, and it's all just various degrees. We all have issues and just in various degrees. So great book to walk through. You don't have to be at the point where you're estranged.
Right. Not at all.
Family rift.
Yeah, I mean, it can be just, whatever the problems are, this is, and it really comes back to, as we talk about a Crazy Cool Family, healing ourselves first.
Yeah.
And I love what you said, that forgiveness is not about it. We don't have to have them act towards us to forgive.
Yeah.
And then you also said that forgiveness is, there's no option. What'd you say? There's no loophole. There's no loophole to forgiveness because it is a superpower that's going to heal us.
Yeah.
And heal our family relationships. And I love that you've been a legacy changer. So
thank you.
Thanks, Julie, for coming on.
Yeah.
We've been so encouraged and inspired by you and your story.
Oh, I've been so inspired by y'all and how you're doing it right. I love the base camp that you have, that you're getting parents to get on, and it's free. I cannot believe. So good for y'all.
And thanks to all our listeners for listening, and we are out of here. So go be crazy parents, crazycoolfamily.com.